So, good afternoon. My name is Klaus, staff here at the Council of Governments. One of the things that I focus on and work with on a regular basis is air quality. And as you might know, our region is non-attainment for pollutant ozone. So, in order to allow a lot of these projects that Dan has talked about, or any of the projects, the multimodal projects that are in a multimodal transportation plan, they have to go through air quality and environmental review from our federal and state partners. And one task of that is to identify possible strategies and implement strategies that would gain us some real-world emission benefits that would lead us towards reaching attainment for ozone in the future. And one of those projects I wanted to talk to you and share with you some of the information that since we implemented a particular strategy, how things have changed and what staff is looking to move forward with in terms of slight change back to the way things were, and seek any of your recommendations or suggestions or comments. So the topic at hand is speed limits. A little bit of a history. Back in 2001, when we were working on an air quality plan back at that time, we worked with our technical committee, the Texas Department of Transportation, local engineers, city engineers, and came up with an idea that, if we modestly reduced speed limits on limited access facilities or freeways and highways, we could generate a slight benefit of emission reductions. Not so much slight, I mean, it's actually a good reduction of emissions. So we went through a process at that time and actually implemented and locally, on a local level, recommended that speed limit reductions be put into place into the air quality plan that the state air agency or the Texas Commission of Environmental Quality would prepare and submit to the Environmental Protection Agency. What we did was, those that were posted at 70 miles an hour were reduced to 65 miles an hour, and those speed limits that were at 65 miles an hour were reduced to 60. So what we're proposing to do, as the title indicates, is going back and changing the speed limits back to the way they were. Now, I say that with a little grain of salt. There's a parallel process. One part of the process is a planning exercise, this is what we're going to be addressing and talking about. On the other hand, is an actual implementation and a technical side, an engineering perspective. So, in the parallel process, we're going through a planning exercise and on paper to reverse the speed limits. And I'll walk you through what that is going to entail. On the other hand, TxDOT is reviewing all the speed limits on the facilities, and they're going to be able, by going through this paper planning exercise, that'll permit and allow TxDOT to go in and actually implement the speed limits that are proper for those particular facilities and corridors. Well, just a little technical background, why these speed limits were actually of consideration back in the day. You can see on an old model that we were using called mobile, you can see on the tail end, we actually were netting some pretty good reductions as speeds increased. Similarly, of all the strategies that we'll implement to try to minimize congestion, keep speeds moving along at a good pace, intelligent transportation, all those types of things. Reducing speed limits actually by, again, a modest amount was actually netting us some really good emission reductions. Well, since this time, there's a new model that's been released, and with the advancement of technologies and the reliability of cars and how clean they've become, this is what the trend looks like today with the new emission factor model. And you can see that it's pretty flat. So by actually having and imposing a speed limit reduction for the sake of air quality is no longer netting us those air quality benefits. So what we're doing is we're going through an exercise to basically what we call in the air quality world substitute. Here's a control strategy that has been said to EPA that we're going to implement to get emission reductions on the red line, but here's the reality of what they really are, and we're going to offer alternative or substituting strategies to get rid of the speed limit strategies out of the legal regulatory document. And as you can see, just the typical things that we do of signal progression and intelligent transportation and minimizing stop and go conditions and increasing speeds are actually getting us a lot more benefits than previous models indicated. So since this time, we've been going through a process of paving a way to allow for this, what we call substitution of taking these environmental speed limit requirements out of the regulatory document and putting in alternatives and alternative projects, so that at the end of the day there's a net zero difference. So that from an air quality perspective, we're not sacrificing air quality by removing a strategy, but in fact we're putting in strategies to offset the difference. So one of the things to paint a picture is, you can see out in the outside this green area, these were all the speed limits that were changed back in 2001. So the blue lines indicate speed limits that were at 65 and that went down to 60. Those facilities in red were those facilities that were posted at 70 and went down to 65. Our modeling exercise, our planning exercise, is simply just putting them back to the way they were and then assessing what the environmental impacts are. Well, from an equality standpoint, all of those speed limits that are being changed are predominantly outside of the green area. So in theory, all these facilities are actually, and the residents that live out there are actually benefiting from the increase in speeds here in the not too distant future. So we came up with a program earlier this year. Our Regional Transportation Council adopted and approved funding that was going to assist in implementing some innovative emission reduction strategies inside this central urban area, where a lot of and the majority of the congestion is, that would then come up with emission reductions that would then help with the offset of any environmental impacts that would occur from raising the speed limits outside of the green area. So what are some of those projects? Within that green area, the central urban area, there's an additional 71 centerline miles that have been funded that TxDOT's working on as we speak to put into place. There's an addition of 526 signals on the arterial systems within the cities that are going to be focused on having some updated signal progression and retiming to allow and prevent a lot of stop and go, and hopefully a lot better progression through multiple signals. Well, we've come up with a lot of what we've realized here recently in the last few years, that during inclement weather or just when there's an accident on a major freeway, what we're looking to do is actually go in and have a concerted timing program along the frontage roads of these facilities, so that if there's an ice storm, or there's accidents and congestion, non-recurring congestion on a freeway, that then we could actually set the timing to those signals along that frontage road to be more apt for folks to be able to get off the freeway and have a clearer path through where the clog or the congestion or the issue is with that facility. We have 18 additional centerline miles of the Intelligent Transportation System. This is where you've seen cameras and a lot of the changeable message signs, and there's fiber optics put in place along the right-of-way and the median, so there's going to be an additional centerline miles of that system. And then there's an additional 27 intersection improvements within that green area that we've identified that are ready to go and easy to implement in a very quick time frame. So these are what's in the green area. And then as a little pictorial of what we're doing on the substitution effort, is that we have to replace the strategy that we currently have with at least the same amount of reductions with whatever it is that we're going to offer. And it has to at least have more or equal to the emission reductions that we're going to substitute. So here is what we've done an analysis. We put all the speed limits back to the way that they originally were, and it's an additional 0.48 tons per day of nitrogen oxides. So of all those additional programs that I shared with you on the other page, we're going to take out 0.48 out of that bucket, and we're going to use to substitute and replace the 0.48 of the speed limits that we're going to propose to take out. We have additional projects that are going to be left in our back pocket to be able to use for future air quality conformities, or the state is currently working on a new air quality plan for EPA. That they're going out to the public in January. There may be additional needs or uses for some of these additional projects. Instead of them having to go through a whole lengthy process to identify them, we identify them up front, have some on the side to be able to be used in the near term. So what we've identified is up to 200, there's about 1,000, a little bit over 1,000 signals that I mentioned on that one slide. We're going to pull out about 293, up to 293 of those locations. we've quantified their signal emission benefits, and they've actually are netting us the 0.48 tons per day of benefit that we're going to offer to the state and the EPA to substitute out for the 0.48 increase that we've modeled on the speed limits. And then on the volatile organic compound side, there's two precursors to ozone, nitrogen oxides and VOCs. When we actually implement a higher speed limit, it actually reduces volatile organic compounds. So we're not focusing our efforts on that particular area because we're actually improving VOCs. So in terms of the time frame, just to point your attention to, we're starting the public meetings here this week. We've already had much discussions with an interagency statewide consultation process. This is with Federal Highway, TxDOT, EPA, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, to make sure that everything we're doing is within legal requirements. We're going to be then taking it out to our technical and policy group in the coming month, of which we hope to be able to get final approval by EPA in October, of which then will pave the way for TxDOT. Remember I mentioned this is the planning part, for TxDOT to be able to then implement what the speed limits actually will be out in the real world in the coming months here, starting in November. So November, following the holidays, the hope is that if everything stays on target, we'll have some changes to the speed limits out onto the freeways, most definitely in the coming year. So in summary, we have speed limits that were implemented, they're no longer warranted. We're looking to substitute those with their benefits. We've identified a bunch of traffic signals, progressions that we're going to substitute, and then following the substitution process, that's when TxDOT will adjust the speed limits based on observed conditions. So Michael, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much. Moving to the mathematics of transportation development credits, you heard Dan Kessler talk about them earlier. Christie's going to tell you what our totals are and where we are in the RTC, Regional Transportation Councils, and